my dear friends, comrades, and fellow citizens. Today I stand before you not as a figure of authority, but as one who has walked the path of struggle and witnessed the profound consequences of indifference, injustice, and fear. I have seen firsthand the destruction that grows from the seeds of hatred, division, and ignorance. And today I want to speak to you, not just as a man of the past, but as a voice for the future of our children, of our people. There are those among us, some of them in positions of power, some of them in the shadows, who will seek to destroy what we have built, to break the very fabric of our humanity. They will seek to turn brother against brother, sister against sister, and to poison our minds with lies that lead us down a path of destruction. Fear is one of the most insidious and powerful tools that oppressors use to maintain control over individuals and entire populations. It is a force that has been wielded throughout history, across cultures, and in various forms of oppression. When fear is introduced into a society, it spreads like a virus, infecting every aspect of human life, thoughts, actions, relationships, and even the very core of one's being. The power of fear lies in its ability to paralyze, to disempower, and to manipulate. Oppressors understand that when people are afraid, they are less likely to challenge authority, question injustices, or stand up for their rights. Fear makes people silent, compliant, and dependent on the system that subjugates them. Fear creates a state of vulnerability that is difficult to overcome. When individuals are gripped by fear, their capacity for rational thought diminishes. They become focused on survival and self-preservation, which often leads to a state of passivity. Under these conditions, a person is less likely to act in defense of justice, equality, or even their own rights, for the fear of retribution outweighs their desire for freedom. The oppressor knows this well and uses fear to weaken resistance by making people more concerned about their safety than about their moral or ethical obligations. Fear suppresses the will to act and freezes people in place, preventing them from rising up against the system that oppresses them. The very mechanisms of fear that are used to control and disempower individuals can take many forms. One of the most common is the use of violence or the threat of violence. History is filled with examples of regimes and leaders who use terror to maintain power. The fear of physical harm, imprisonment, or death keeps the oppressed in line and prevents them from speaking out or protesting. The threat of punishment, whether it be in the form of police brutality, imprisonment, or even execution, looms large over individuals, and it forces them to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. In this way, fear prevents people from organizing, from uniting, and from challenging the status quo. But the power of fear is not always tied to physical violence alone. Psychological fear is just as, if not more, dangerous. The fear of losing one's livelihood, the fear of being ostracized or shunned by society, the fear of not being able to provide for one's family, these are all forms of fear that weigh heavily on individuals. Fear is often subtly planted into the hearts of people through propaganda, misinformation, and manipulation. The oppressor uses these tools to create a narrative that convinces people that resistance is futile or that they have no power to change their circumstances. This kind of psychological fear is insidious because it can become internalized, leading people to believe that they are powerless, insignificant, or unworthy of change. Once this belief takes hold, it becomes self-reinforcing, perpetuating the cycle of disempowerment. Fear also thrives on isolation. When individuals feel isolated, either physically, socially, or emotionally, they become more susceptible to fear. In oppressive systems, individuals are often isolated from one another, unable to build solidarity or form connections that might empower them. Divide and conquer tactics are employed to create distrust and suspicion among people, further exacerbating the isolation. In such an environment, people are more likely to believe that they are alone in their struggles, that no one else shares their pain, or that no one will come to their aid. This fear of isolation feeds into the cycle of disempowerment, as individuals feel that their voices will not be heard and that their actions will not make a difference. The oppressor benefits from this isolation, for when people are divided, they are less likely to challenge the system together. The fear of losing one's identity or culture is another powerful way that oppression is maintained. Oppressors often seek to erase the unique characteristics and traditions of those they subjugate, stripping away the very essence of who they are. The fear of cultural extinction or being forced to conform to a dominant culture can be paralyzing. It leaves people fearful of asserting their heritage, their values, and their identity. Instead of proudly embracing who they are, they shrink back, afraid that any expression of their individuality or uniqueness will lead to marginalization, persecution, or worse. This fear undermines the confidence that people need to take action and to challenge the forces that seek to erase them. Ultimately, the oppressor's goal is to create a society in which fear governs every aspect of life. It becomes the framework within which all decisions are made. People live in constant apprehension of what will happen if they speak out. What will happen if they refuse to conform? What will happen if they demand justice? They are kept in a state of submission by their fear of what might happen to them or to those they love. Fear keeps people from imagining a better future, a future in which they are free from oppression, and it convinces them that their suffering is inevitable and unchangeable. However, fear is not invincible. While it is a powerful tool of oppression, it is not insurmountable. When individuals begin to understand that fear is used as a weapon against them, they can start to dismantle its power. The courage to confront fear, to speak out despite it, and to act in the face of it is the first step toward liberation. People can unite in solidarity, support one another, and build the strength needed to overcome the fear that has been planted within them. It takes time, perseverance, and collective action, but fear can be overcome. And when it is, the true power of the oppressed emerges unstoppable, determined, and unbreakable. The power of fear may seem formidable, but it is nothing compared to the power of hope, love, and unity. When we stand together, when we challenge the forces that seek to control us, we begin to reclaim our power. And in that moment, fear loses its grip on us. Division is a powerful force, one that has been employed throughout history by those in positions of power as a tool to maintain control over the masses. When societies are divided, whether along lines of race, ethnicity, religion, class, or political ideology, they become far weaker and more vulnerable to manipulation. The oppressors know that when people are divided, they are easier to control, for they are less likely to unite in resistance against the forces that oppress them. Division weakens the collective strength of a community, fosters distrust, and sows the seeds of hatred, creating an environment in which people are more focused on their differences than on the common struggles they face. It becomes a mechanism that prevents solidarity and ultimately stifles the possibility of positive change. In any society, unity is a crucial ingredient for progress and for the protection of rights. People who are united are able to mobilize, organize, and demand their dignity and freedom. They can challenge systems of oppression with a collective voice that is difficult to ignore. However, when division is introduced, it becomes far more difficult for people to come together. The focus shifts from shared experiences and collective action to internalized conflict and suspicion. When people begin to view one another as rivals or enemies based on superficial differences, they become fragmented, and the potential for collective power is lost. The mechanisms of division are subtle and insidious, often taking root in the most ordinary aspects of daily life. Oppressors are skilled at creating and exacerbating divisions by emphasizing the differences between groups rather than the shared humanity that binds them together. They might do this through rhetoric that demonizes one group while elevating another, using fear and mistrust to deepen the sense of us versus them. For example, political leaders may exploit racial or ethnic tensions to distract from issues of inequality or injustice. By framing certain groups as dangerous or inferior, they create an environment in which people are more likely to turn on one another, seeing their fellow human beings not as allies but as threats. In this environment of division, hatred can thrive. Hatred is the natural byproduct of division. When individuals are encouraged to view others through the lens of difference and animosity, it becomes all too easy to dehumanize them. Once dehumanized, it is easier to justify discrimination, violence, and oppression. The result is a toxic cycle in which the more divided people become, the more they begin to view each other with suspicion and fear. This cycle perpetuates itself, creating barriers that are nearly impossible to overcome without concerted effort and intention. The people in power know the potency of division because they understand that the stronger the bonds between individuals, the more difficult it becomes to maintain control. When people are united, their collective power is a force to be reckoned with. A united people are a threat to any oppressive regime because they possess the potential to challenge that regime and to demand change. But division weakens this power. By driving wedges between groups and pitting people against one another, the oppressors dilute the potential for meaningful resistance. Rather than focusing on the system that oppresses them, people become consumed with the conflict between themselves, allowing the true source of their suffering to go unchecked. It is important to recognize that division is not something that happens by accident. It is a deliberate strategy. Those in power often use fear, misinformation, and even violence to create divisions that benefit them. This is especially evident in times of social unrest or economic crisis, where leaders may scapegoat marginalized groups in order to divert attention away from the deeper structural issues at play. By creating an enemy within society, the ruling class ensures that the attention of the people is diverted from the true causes of their suffering: inequality, exploitation, and injustice.